Today, we're talking about the rise of a new counter elite. So, recently, I was having this conversation with a woman, and she was telling me about her brilliant brother. Her brother has a master's degree, he's capable, smart, charming, and all winter, he was sitting at home playing video games, depressed, and smoking weed. And he has no clear career path, right? No girlfriend. He feels like AI is going to replace whatever talents he had anyway. And she saw this like bright man kind of resign into nihilism, and she was very concerned about it. And this isn't rare today. In fact, we're watching a quiet mass exodus of capable people. And this is not a moral failing, as the media wants to frame it. In fact, this is a structural problem. When the normal paths stop working, young men split into two groups generally. Those who opt out into nihilism and shuffle their feet through the mainstream world, and those who opt out to build something new. This second path is producing what I call a counter elite. And here's what's wild. When I tell people my age that we're literally building parallel institutions and aiming to build the next great academy, new towns, new brotherhoods, hundreds of thousands of young men are immediately on board. Strangers on park benches are asking me how to join something like that, how to build something like that. But my parents look at me like I grew two heads. And here's this generational split I kind of see happening. You see, when my dad was growing up, he believed generally that the world was getting better. He was a patriot. He was a fighter pilot. He saw opportunities to serve his country, provide for his family, and attain the American dream. Yeah, the government had problems, but overall he trusted it and he made it. He made, his life into something worthy. And this is not the case anymore in general. You see, I talk to my cousins. I talk to elite military, men, smart people all the time. Most of them despise the military industrial complex. They despise the bankers' wars. They distrust the politicians. They can barely pay rent, and dating and everything else feels broken. And this is why my generation is the revolutionary generation, because we grew up in a world that was already declining, a world that was already fucked. So let me break down why this is happening at a structural level and why this is producing one of the most transformative counter elites of all time. So the first part of this framework, we're going to break down the 6 structural problems. And we need to understand these deeply if we want any real shot at building the parallel institutions, the parallel academies of the future. Let's begin. 1, transient and unstable. So for the vast majority of human history, life was stable and slow. Even if there was a big change, like a flood or a war, people eventually just resettled and returned to the way life was. There was a normal. They were truly rooted in something. That is not the case today. My entire generation is trained to expect nothing to last and everything to change constantly, right? So to give you an example of this, my grandparents, and probably yours too, owned a house at 25. My generation, we subscribe to an apartment indefinitely. We subscribe to a friend circle before they move away to college or to jobs across the state. We subscribe to a job for a few years at a time before that goes away. Even dating feels like a subscription service today because most people don't date for marriage. And marriage, even that, it's a thing of the past. The divorce rates are above 50%. Things are getting wild out here. And generally, life feels like a subscription service. Everything comes and goes, and the world is completely unstable. I could list a million reasons from AI to, economic problems and changes. But the bottom line is my generation never really acquires real ownership, real power, or a real place in their lives. Me and my brother, we're approaching 30. We're both well educated. We've worked a wide variety of jobs, had a wide variety of girlfriends, and yet nothing really sticks. No community, no job. None of it sticks unless we actively build it ourselves. There's no more social structures or rootedness that we can fall into. And this can create a sense of nihilism for a lot of young men. This brings us to the second problem of modernity is a deep lack of ownership. This is the structural cause that is creating the counter elite. Okay. So to outline this as briefly as possible, imagine you own a piece of land within a community and you think to yourself, My children's children's children are probably going to inherit this piece of land and this community. What happens? Well, you take care of it. You start thinking generations ahead, right? You invest everything into making the things around you better. Now imagine that you're just renting the house on that piece of land. You probably won't even plant a garden, okay? When I've rented houses, which I've done my whole life, I've never once planted a garden. I've never once cleaned out the garage or done a deep clean because I don't care. I don't give a shit. And that's because only when you own something do you truly take responsibility for it. If you don't have ownership, you don't have enough meaning to go above and beyond. And this is echoed in someone like Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He said, when a man can't find a deep sense of meaning, he pursues pleasure. The less you own, the more you think in short time horizons and only about yourself. And this is why my generation is characterized as being infantile and selfish, right? It's because we don't own anything. And it's really hard to own anything. And that's because problem number three is distance from power. Okay. When you see Gaza being blown up on X, you see billionaires becoming trillionaires. And the debt climbing towards 40 trillion, funding corrupt institutions that are absolutely full of fraud. And it feels like you can't do anything about it. The main instinct is to shut down. This is what happens when societies become too big and too corrupt. It creates too much distance from power, okay? Basically, power has been abstracted upwards, and there's been more and more inequality in power. To give you an example of this, in a small village, if you have a problem, you go and talk to the leader of the village, aka your cousin. In a company, you go and talk to the manager or one of the executives. In a corporation, you file a ticket. In modern society, you tweet into the void. Your voice, it no longer matters. Your vote, it doesn't matter, right? Your voice means nothing. You can do nothing and the world is going to shit. Whether you agree or don't agree with that perspective, that's what a lot of my generation feels deep down, right? And this is why they opt out. It's because they feel like they're on a company, they're in a nation, they're in a team where their voice means nothing. So it makes them shut down instead of engage with the civic environment instead of in civic engagement. So basically, being a citizen in America today is the exact opposite of being a citizen in something like ancient Athens. In the old world, my friends, citizenship was sacred. Citizenship meant something. It meant that you played an active role in the political body of your city-state, okay? If you were a citizen of Athens, you participated in the assembly with maybe 500, 5,000 other men, right? You had debates with these guys. You had symposiums with the other citizens, right? And these debates, you felt like your ideas might have the potential of actually influencing decisions. And if your ideas didn't have the potential, well, shit then. Then you're going to go become a great military leader or a great orator on the stage, right? And in this model, basically, because the city-state was only like 100,000 people or less, men with real potential felt like they could rise to the top. So they aspired to do so. A guy like Demosthenes, who's born to like a rich merchant, he wasn't of noble blood. Nonetheless, he became one of the most powerful and famous men of Athens and of Greece, right? So in this case scenario, elite aspirants had space to claim direct power, right? And when you don't have that, when the Senate is so old, when all the money is so lofty and high, when it's harder and harder to feel like you can make lasting dent in the universe around you, this is what creates a counter elite, okay? And we're going to talk about this formation around parallel institutions in a second here. Let me just get through the rest of the diagnosis briefly, because this is important stuff. The fourth problem here, okay, lack of identity and a sacred center. This is the spiritual crisis of our times. Basically, the bonds of family, tribe, nation, church, these have all fallen. They're dead in my generation. We have no roots, no heritage. People don't even, remember what kind of people or heritage they belong to. And this is creating a spiritual crisis of identity. Basically, as a society, we hate our founding fathers. Like unconsciously for some reason today. And also we avoid the big questions of life. The big questions are, what is the purpose of life? What is virtue? What is sacred? Why am I here? What is a good life? And what happens after I die? Society doesn't just fail to answer these questions today. Society fails to even ask them. You see, we are so secular today. We've had this big separation of church and state. And basically, we live in a society that only talks about the rise and fall of stock markets, of political parties, of the economy. We never ask, like, what the hell am I here to do, right? And we have an intentionally castrated culture in the effort of inclusion, of including every voice, opinion, and worldview. And when we do that, we forget who we are. We forget this is actually who we are. This is our identity. That is our ideal. This is what makes you an American or part of this town or part of this nation. We don't have that anymore. And we have removed the sacred center. Therefore, everything is absurd. Every single healthy civilization had a sacred center, okay? That whether this was the church at the center of the community or the religious gathering space of some kind, it was the center of the village. The heroic myth was the heart of the entire culture. The heroic myths were told to young boys and young girls every single night. And these myths told the people who they were, right? What was worth fighting for, what was worth sacrificing for, and where they came from. You take these away, the sacred gathering place and the sacred myth. When you take these away, you lose two things immediately. You lose identity, who you are as part of a people, and you lose meaning, why you're here and what actually matters. As you can tell, all of these problems we're diagnosing cut into men's meaning, their will to fight for something bigger than themselves. And when they don't have it, well, they tap out. And that's because they're not a citizen. They're not a member of a tribe anymore. They're a consumer living in an apartment complex and they barely know their neighbors. They're an atomized individual with no roots and no ideals. Welcome to the end, my friends. This is because of this lack of identity and sacred center, people are breaking. You see, the deepest spiritual need in humanity is not comfort. It's not tech overlords. The deepest spiritual need within humanity is to serve something bigger than yourself, a people, an ideal, a mission that you actually respect. We need to feel like we are a valuable part of a larger whole. And when we're in flow state with that team, with that whole, striving for the ideal, this is the peak experience in life. It's not your individual flow state. It's your flow state within a bigger project, right? When you have real citizenship. And without this, men waste away or pursue solely individualistic ends. This is the end of a society, right? So, and this brings us into when you lose identity and a sacred center, what the next thing to topple is structures of prestige, okay? So remember that brilliant brother that we talked about in the beginning who's sitting at home playing video games right now? He's aimless because he lacks a structure of prestige he can rise through. Not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur, constantly building their own structures. In fact, most people need to exist within one. And generally, men love ranking up in hierarchies. We have a very anti-hierarchy ideology today because we have a very feminine ideology today. If you look at men love playing video games like Call of Duty because they love competing to prestige to higher levels. All of their video games are built hierarchically so that you rise to higher levels of achievement. This is why young men obsess over gamifying life, gamifying personal development, okay? Hierarchies and levels of prestige are the foundational model and idea behind the Ivy League schools, secret societies, Freemasonry, military ranks and units. It's also seen in every spiritual order, from the Knights Templar to the soldiers' cult of Mithras in Rome to the Druidic order of the Celts. All of these had clear ranks, clear degrees, and clear levels of prestige. And what happened there was these centers basically function as lifelong centers of development. By rising through them, men gained real status, real skill, real networks, and real meaning in their actual lives. Essentially, these were institutions that produced real respect and honor, okay? Men want to strive for respect and honor. It's actually what men want most, is to be respected. And when you have an institution that gives that, it gives so much structure to the rest of life and to most men. All of these institutions have radically fallen. And it's very problematic because this leads to a place and a society where there's no social recognition and no respect. This is the biggest problem of the entire video, if we're going to name one, I think. Even if you achieve greatness today, who sees it? In a tribal society, achievement was very visible, okay? If you hunted well, if you fought bravely, if you built something beautiful, or you led wisely, your people knew. You were surrounded by peers. You achieved and received respect. Men basically have always competed constantly to become excellent on the hunt, in war, building, as craftsmen, as leaders. In fact, your brothers around you demanded excellence of you, because if you weren't excellent, you let down the whole tribe, right? And also, because of this excellence was demanded of you, excellence bought and brought status. It brought power, and also it brought women. This is why women, mate selection is generally comes down to the status of the man. And you can measure the health of a culture by one single question. Does the most virtuous and capable man receive the most respect, or just the richest one? Whatever a culture rewards with status, whatever the status symbol is for men, men will seek to become it, because it's what earns them a mate. But today, outside of money, looks, or online clout, we barely have status at all. Let me repeat that. We don't have true status anymore, and that's because we barely have communities anymore. Status can only exist within a social organism, and we're not social. After college, most men live alone. They work alone, or they work in a job with colleagues. They strive alone, and basically, excellence, when it's unseen, it slowly dies. People are so alone today. Our social circles are shrinking. Our campuses are shrinking. Our peers are shrinking, especially outside of college or the workplace. And this is one of the hardest things that young men have to battle against. To give you a very personal example here, I was valedictorian of my high school class. The social recognition I had at that moment, that year, it felt really good after I'd worked so hard. But since then, I have basically been alone for a decade. No peers, very little recognition, and my greatest accomplishments, I am the only one applauding. This may sound really vain, but this has been the hardest part for me since dropping out of college. It's been a very sad and lonely journey. And in that, I've written a grueling book. I overcame immense demons and addictions. I've become excellent at dance, speech, martial arts, business, YouTube, meditation. I've striven for so long. I've striven every day, and no one even knows it. Very few celebrate me in it. And almost none of my friends have been with me for more than a year or two. And it's been just me against the world, and only me bearing witness to it. And for the last 10 years, I shit you not, for 10 years now, I've had a recurring dream of being surrounded by my peers, by men and women my age, surrounded by rivals, by friends, by allies, by teammates, by community, having a place to shine, having a place to fail, having a place to be seen. And it's so sad that I've never been able to find that. Honestly, it's the loneliness on my journey that's been crushing me the most. It's not the lack of love. It's the lack of peers, right? And I'm old enough now to celebrate myself. Like, I don't need much validation anymore. I'm a badass and I know it. I'm building campuses as I move through life. I have friends sitting here with me now who get to see me and know me at a very deep level. And for a soul like mine, this is important, my friends. For a soul like mine, being able to win distinction is very, very important. It is not vain if as a society, we understand how to use the will and the drive towards distinction to produce great men. And only when there's a culture of respect, veneration, and recognition of greatness will men really strive for it. Most people will never become all they can be if they are sitting in a room alone where no one sees. Without peers and recognition, most men will resign themselves to mediocrity. And this is why we're going to build new centers, new campuses, new academies, and new monasteries of human excellence. We must, because we must rebuild social structures. So this gets us into the framework of what the hell do we do about all these problems, and how do we build something better? So if we step back and look at the full picture, just to recap really briefly, when people don't own anything, they stop thinking in generations. When they're far from power, they stop believing their actions matter. When identity and sacred meaning disappear, life loses direction and cohesion. And when there is no structures of prestige or recognition, even excellence becomes invisible. At this point, the problem is not about the individual. The problem is completely civilizational. And when civilizations reach this stage, the most capable people do not submit. They don't reform the system, they opt out, and they build something new entirely. This is the birth of the counter elite. So this revolution, it's not going to be a violent one with blood and spears and guns. It's actually about building parallel institutions, okay? So a parallel institution is essentially a system that just replaces the old system, right? Netflix, for instance, didn't reform Blockbuster. America didn't reform Britain. They simply built something obviously superior and let the old world collapse under its own weight. This is the path forward for the counter elite today. So what are parallel institutions? You could think about a parallel institution being something like a mutual aid society, like your church, your lodge, your community that you buy into. And that is your life insurance and your health insurance instead of some big corporation that's extracting profit off the top end. A parallel institution is kind of like a Montessori school versus the broken education system. Parallel institutions are things that are built alongside the existing infrastructure and seek to completely surpass it in every way. And our vision for building parallel institutions is essentially, my dream is to build a new academy town. Imagine a center for lifelong learning and the pursuit of excellence. This is not a 4-year degree mill that loads you with student debt and ideology. This is actually a place where people can develop real skills, real character, and be on a campus of like-minded people. And this campus operates as a filtration system into new types of neighborhoods and new types of towns, the academy town. This is a big vision, and we're starting with it really small. I run an online men's academy, online, and from there I filter people together into the real world to build residencies. Right now I'm sitting here with 2 friends. We have 4 or 5 more guys from the network coming to join us in this big house for a month. We're essentially starting pop-up monasteries. And when I say that word monastery, people think of very like cultish, monkish dispositions. My vision is to start by building monasteries that are cool. Imagine monk mode meets highly filtered men meets a very affordable residency where we can just work on our businesses, build our skills, build our networks side by side. If you're going to strive for greatness, do it with your brothers. Highly aligned men living together. And basically, we will expand from there. As I said, I already have a small team with me, and with the intention of doing ongoing rentals, getting bigger and bigger houses until we have the core team ready to go build and finance land in America to start the first monastery and maybe sister organization next to it. If you are interested in doing a collaborative project like this with me, come join the Men's Academy. We're going to build the next great fraternal network online, manifest that into the real world to help build new towns. This is my attempt at building parallel institutions. There's a link below if you want to talk to me one-on-one about that. And now I want to talk to you about the 5 pillars that are underlying this type of movement and how you can apply them to your own institutions or joining me. Number 1, strong identity. Strong identity. Every parallel institution needs to answer these questions. Who are we? What do we stand for? What's our heritage, our vision, our values? For instance, I'm going to use the monastery example constantly in this. We're going to build the next great fraternal network and semi-monastic system. And this is modeled on the Knights Templar, on martial arts schools, on the great academies and monasteries of the past. In fact, monasteries have been successful in almost every culture across human history, right? The monastic system of Europe, the Shaolin martial arts schools, the samurai schools of Japan, these have been everywhere. And what kind of young man doesn't want to live in that, aesthetic, in that environment? It's why they the Knights Templar aesthetic is so popular today, because young men are learning for the monastic life. And I just want to do it as a temporary thing. Like you do it for a month, you do it for a year, you do it for a few years. And through that system, you find the ones, you find the wolf pack who are going to go the distance with you. So you can see with the monastic system, right? And you can think about this really deeply if you're talking about building a brotherhood, a town, a business, a school, a sorority, whatever it needs, whatever it is, it needs to be an identity that people can authentically claim as part of themselves, and an identity, a vision that is rooted in tradition. The more rooted you are in a tradition, and you have the sense that you're updating the tradition, like not to be grandiose, but Buddha updated Hinduism, right? There's so many instances where like Napoleon felt like he was an update. Caesar felt like he was an update to the old institutions. You need that kind of mentality, even if you're doing it on a very small level. So basically, you need a vision that is rooted in a tradition. Once you have those two things, you can start thinking about some of the other pillars here that are important. The second one is stability and rootedness. Basically, you need the sense that you're eventually building for permanence. The important piece here is people want to trust that their efforts will last for decades, okay? This means actual ownership, which we'll talk about in a second. This means like buying land together. This means creating multi-generational projects, thinking about legacy, thinking about impact and permanence, right? Where people have the sense that my children's children will know this place. When you have that, it creates more and more meaning. Essentially, when you're building parallel institutions, you need to think about how do you max out the meaning barometer, whatever. You need to max out meaning for people so that they will give their all to the growth of new organizations. Now, to do this in the start is so hard, okay? What I recommend is that you don't think about ownership, permanence, or any of these things at first. What you need to do is unite a group of peers, a true wolf pack that is dedicated to going the distance with you. And if you're not a leader in that sense, like going to be making all this content, organizing people, networking, building teams, then join a team. There's no shame in joining a team, right? The number one thing you need to do is filter the people from your online network into your real life network. And from there, consistently vet people for who's going to go the distance with you. When guys come out to join me in real life, right? I've had dozens of people come out from my YouTube channel. When people come to join me, I'm always looking, does this person have best friend potential? Would they be the godfather of my children? And do they bring unique excellencies, unique talents that make the whole stronger, that make the whole better? When people meet those things and like we build a deep sense of trust, it's like, man, I found a partner. I found someone I can go the distance with, like my boy Steven sitting over there, right? And so to find these people, what I recommend is the residency to citizen model. This is what we're working on and what I recommend for parallel institutions. Online network into a residency, into a citizenship. You build a network, you build a campus, you build a citizen body around a parallel institution of some kind, right? So that brings us to the third point here, which is ownership and power, okay? It's important to give people a real stake, real skin in the game, and the potential to rise to power. Leaders, top talent, the people you really want to attract, they don't want to be followers for long. And this is something I've learned 1,000 times over. You got to give them space and promote the best, okay? Personally, I'm making the shift within the Men's Academy right now. For 2 years, the Men's Academy has been more of a discussion group of really like-minded men from this channel, and it's been the seed of different types of projects like the Retribalize Project, my second YouTube channel where I talk about the growth of new social structures, right? So it's been a seed of many things. But instead of just running it like a business, trying to constantly add value to these 80 odd members, I'm turning the whole thing into a collaborative project, okay, with a definite end. Goal number one of the Men's Academy is to create a real life residency. But instead of coming to the guys with like, here's my definite plan, X, Y, and Z, it's more so like, here's the North Star and my ideas. What do you guys think the culture should be like? Should we have a forge for building, armor and, metalwork, a carpentry space, woodworking? What kind of, onboarding process is there? Is there a course of some kind? How do you kick out members? Blah, blah, blah. Give people space to really collaborate with you. I talk to so many intelligent innovators, entrepreneurs, leaders, and so many of them have such clear visions that there's no space for other really intelligent, aligned people to come join them. This is a huge mistake. This is why there's 1,000 different people trying to start different types of schools. 1,000 people trying to start new types of, healthcare systems. When in reality, you need to get the best 30 of them and unite under one banner. This is what America did really well, right? Is they united all these different factions into one project, right? So goal number 2 then is, as you start building the residency of some kind, or having a really clear goal, like a collaborative project, as you build a collaborative project, then build a system that promotes the best and expands, right? So essentially, you need to make power and leadership something people feel like they can influence, they can earn through their own merits. This is what I mean by making the project collaborative, right? And you can see things like co-ops, land trusts, DAOs. The idea of a round table is so important. Any structure where members can earn actual equity, not temporary access, is very important. Basically, you need to think about, as a leader and as a team member, how can you create an organization that constantly and rigorously promotes highly talented people to leadership positions and ownership positions. This is what our society does so terribly, and why there's literally the emergence of a counter elite. It's because so many elite aspirants, right, don't want to go through all the red tape, don't want to go through these broken institutions, feel like our society is ruled by a gerontocracy, right? So hence they leave, right? You need to create space. Now, obviously in this, when we're talking about land trusts, DAOs, roundtables, things like this, I like distinction. Distinction's important. I like meritocracy. I like the idea of founder-led companies and founder-led organizations. But at the center, you must always create space for the exceptional to walk beside you. So this gets us into structures of prestige. So actually, I'm going to talk about this after this is part of proximity. So building structures of prestige, the first thing you need to think about is proximity. Okay. If you want to build a culture, where excellence is seen and then celebrated. This is like every high culture has this virtue of arete, the vast celebration of excellence as great human achievement, right? And to create this kind of culture of public virtue, this requires physical proximity first, regular gatherings, shared experiences. You can't do this on Zoom, but if you're a leader, just organize people, even in your local community, to meet up every week, to be in community, to work in community, and even better, filter from the online world so you find the most aligned people in the world to build with. That's why we created the Retribalize app, by the way. So basically prioritize proximity, prioritize the residency model, and create new types of social clubs and campuses. Once you have proximity, a clear goal, and you're marching towards that with people, now you focus on structures. Most people thrive within structures that have clear levels, clear expectations, clear recognition of achievement, right? In the old world, for instance, if a druid entered a town, everyone respected him. The children clamored for his stories, the sick for his knowledge of medicine. People respected his wisdom and his power to delegate disputes. Being a druid, it used to mean something. It meant moral excellence, knowledge, and wisdom. And that's because he graduated through a system of real prestige, of true status. We need that again in every domain. So if you're building a new parallel institution like the monastery, the aim should be that when men leave the monastery, they're men's academy men. That means something. It means they have a clear commitment to moral excellence, right? And to create that kind of feeling, you need to create clear hierarchies and standards that people can ascend through merit, right? The idea of guilds, of apprenticeship, journeyman, master, initiate, brother, elder, student, teacher, grandmaster. We have this distrust of these kinds of systems. It's because these kinds of systems, the temporal authority, the worldly authority at the top of the system, is actually lacking the spiritual and moral authority that used to go with it. So you need to create real structures and real hierarchies that are reflective of a spiritual hierarchy, a spiritual moral order. But as I was saying, again, don't build these systems. Don't start here. Don't build these systems before they are needed, or else you are just LARPing at building some kind of secret society, right? Gather people towards a goal first, Embody the ideal the best you possibly can. Strive for it yourself and help others grow to it around you, and then let the systems reveal themselves. In fact, this is the principle of collaboration and organic emergence. As the founder, the less you can architect systems and the more you can unite hearts, the more successful you will be. Let the people around you have the meaningful stake of organizing systems, people, projects, and delegating responsibility as the team expands outward, right? In the beginning of any project, like the Men's Academy, it's very founder-led. I'm out here, crying into the wilderness, trying to find my people, to get the people into one spot, to do something in the real world. It's all I want to do. But as the organization grows, as very talented, capable, and exceptional people start joining me, building relationships in real life, my clear executive command actually gets dispersed across the organization more and more and more as it builds. And that should be the point, that the structure replaces the leader one day, right? And in doing so, in this collaborative, organic emergence of parallel institutions, what you should be aiming at as a leader, as a founding member, is a sacred center and sacred identity, okay? I left this for last because this should be the most organically emergent thing possible, or else you are starting a cult. Let me explain. So leaders in the parallel society movement don't make the mistake of the secular modern society. You must wrestle with the big questions right from the get-go, right? What is the purpose of life? What is virtue? What is sacred? What is the ideal? What happens after death? You don't need everyone to agree on these answers. Actually, don't look for agreement on these answers. You just need these questions to be asked and taken very seriously. These should orient everything. If you are going to start a Christian compound, a Christian community, you already have these big questions answered for you. But if you're going to do it in a different way and you're not going to follow a strict religious tradition like myself, you need these questions to start orienting things. Sorry, I got some shit on my teeth because I've been talking for 3 hours trying to make this video. Okay. So as you ask the big questions as a group, this starts to create a sacred center. It creates a church, a philosophy, a way of living, a way of ritual, a monastery that gives life depth beyond the material world. Okay. And as I said before, this should be the product of pure organic emergence. As I was saying to guys in the Men's Academy the other day, if I came to you right now with my 12-step spiritual teaching that creates enlightened gurus, everyone would be like, you fucking cult leader. No one cares. No one cares about your master plans or your master teachings anymore. But if I was like, hey guys, we're going to go get 20 super like-minded men together and we're going to go into the wilderness, rent a cabin, and do severe spiritual discipline and training, 3 hours a day, 3 hours of movement practices, 3 hours of meditation, fasting, all the things. And we're going to collaborate on building, a shared spiritual idea, practice, and understanding. Everyone would be like, I am so on board for that. And that teaching would be open to innovation, open to exploration and expansion. In fact, I would say this is how the great religious teachings have come into being. Granted, most of them have had a clear founder, someone who's broken through. I don't even know if we would trust that guy anymore. Anyways, what I'm saying here is don't legislate worship, right? In brotherhood projects, just go meditate. Invite people to meditate with you and create this shared, organically emerging culture by doing your best and encouraging other people to practice public virtue. Basically, lead by example and let the mastermind effect do the rest. So, I do talk about all of these points deeply on the Retribalize Project, my second YouTube channel. I'll link it below. But to conclude here, I want to talk about the mindset shift. So when we're seeing the breakdown of institutions, the decay of society, the distrust in, our leaders, a lot of men opt into nihilism. Okay. People get very wary about the end of the world. I, on the other hand, am absolutely stoked for the end of the world. Bring it on. Because in this age of nihilism and breakdown, there is incredible meaning to be found in pioneering something new. Be a leader of the parallel movement. There's so much space for you. In fact, There's so few of us out here. There's so few of people who are actually organizing things in the real world with the intention of building new social structures, new identity, new sacred centers, and new things that provide for the foundational of human experience, like belonging to something bigger, right? You need to understand the deep problems and how to address them by organizing things in real life. And if you want to come join me, come join the other guys. We want to build the first great monastery of the modern day. 80 men are already in the network. The next residency launches this summer. There's a link below. And I'm going to keep, crying the signal out into the wilderness. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you liked this video and you want to be part of the revolutionary generation, you can click here for my last video on the great man versus the managerial psychopaths. Very important video. See you there. Peace.